What's going on, folks? I am sitting here with Daniel, and we've got some beers, we've got some microphones, and we've got a badass rifle sitting in between us. So I've had two previous podcasts where I went in depth, like probably way too in depth, just talking about every component that I put into my hunting rifle and why I did it. And then I did the same thing for my arrow setup. And then I did the same thing for my long range precision rifle. And so that's kind of what we're going to do today, except it's going to be a little bit more interactive and a little bit more fun, I think. So
there is beer involved.
There is beer involved. That makes most things better. So I guess this is a hybrid concept of both a long range precision rifle and a hunting rifle, and how to truly have the best of both worlds.
Yep. While
making as few compromises as possible. So I guess, do we want to start with how you got here, or do you want to start with going through components, or how do you want to go through this thing?
Yeah, let's start how we got here.
Okay.
So I've been looking at this rifle for probably a year, and I'll just kind of tell you guys what the setup is first, and then we can dive into why and all the components. So it's a Christensen Arms modern precision rifle in a 24-inch carbon wrap barrel, and it's a 6.5 Creedmoor. And the optic on it is a Nightforce NX8 4x32 by 50. So it's a pretty badass setup from my opinion. And what I was looking for a year ago is, I was starting to get into some long range shooting. I've got a Ruger Precision 6.5 Creedmoor. That's what we've gone out to Pliny's place and shot 1,000 yards with. And
that's what we did the video of, you with the first that 4-16 scope. And
4-16 True Glow Eminence.
Yeah.
It's a great scope. I mean, it hit the target at 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
So since then, I kind of got the bug, and we were talking about this and joking about it earlier. I went from kind of the gun owner that's like, man, I just want a bunch of cool stuff that shoots. Like I'll take shotguns and ARs and all this stuff to like the last couple of years. I'm like, no, I want stuff that can touch things long ways away.
We were joking earlier. I was like, you went from the guy who just wants the most bottle rockets to now somebody who wants like to fly an F-35.
I want to be like Elon Musk. So the concept of this came a while ago. I wanted a better kind of hunting rifle, right? So I've got a Savage Access 2 that I bought for $300 at Academy, and I've killed a ton of animals with it.
And I kind of swayed you into that, I feel like, and you immediately kind of like passed that level, and you're like, okay, what's next? Because that's almost always my recommendation for somebody who's getting into shooting rifles or getting into hunting, in terms of just best, like an accurate rifle. Like the accuracy to dollar ratio is probably optimal in that rifle.
Yeah. Well, and it's got a little Weaver 3x9. Like, it's a cheap rifle, right?
Yeah.
And I've killed way more animals with that thing than anything else that I own. And it's worked great. It's a 270, and I'll still use it to go hunt whitetail with. But I wanted to upgrade the scope, and then I'm like, man, I don't want to put a $600 scope on a $300 rifle. And then, I started thinking about my Ruger precision rifle. I'm like, well, I kind of want to upgrade that too. It's accurate, but it's an entry-level precision rifle. If you can say such. I mean, I think I have the version 1. I think they're $1,200, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's entry level, and I put a Nikon FX1000 black on it, which is 6x24, great scope. But I was like, I want something different, and so I started coming up with this. I want a rifle that can do all things.
One rifle to rule them all.
One rifle to rule them all. And I was struggling. So I debated a lot. I was thinking about, first I was thinking about a 300 Win Mag. Then I was thinking about a 300 PRC, because Pliny was talking to me about that round. I'm like, man, that's a cool round. And I was like, man, but I don't want to shoot a 300 any caliber long periods of time, right? Like, I don't want to shoot 10 shots with it in a day. That'll just destroy my shoulder. Plus, it's got to be heavy. All these kinds of thoughts go through my mind.
Well, and I think ultimately, so there were three categories that you were looking to fill. One was something that fills the role of my normal just deer and hog hunting rifle that I feel super confident in, that I can hike around with. Then also the role of 0 to 1,000 long range precision gun.
Yep.
But then also the like, what if I get a chance to hunt bigger game?
Yeah.
And so I feel
that's
like
a good point.
because that's, when you're looking at the 300 Win Mag or the 300 PRC, that was a little bit more heavily focused towards that larger, moose, elk, nilgai, the bigger game category. But I think you correctly realized that was less of a priority than the long range precision gun.
Yes.
And the hunting gun, and it got to the point where there were some of those features that were mutually exclusive in terms of size and weight constraints and just general firepower and things like that.
Yeah, and so so leading up to all this over the last year, I've kind of been culling my collection a bit. So I had a couple of 40 caliber pistols, and I have a lot of 9s, and so I just decided to go straight 9. And I've got a couple of 45s, but 9 and 45 I want to stick to. So I ended up selling some of those, sold all my 40 caliber ammo. The price of guns are up right now, so it worked out well in my favor.
It's like if you're ever going to just move stuff,
just get rid of it now.
Yeah, now is the best it's probably going to be in a while.
So I ended up having some extra money, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll go do a custom built rifle. And I was thinking through that, and
you were looking at what, like Alamo Precision, and Stiller, and some of that stuff.
Yeah, and then I've got a friend that I think his gunsmith. So he owned a gun store, and his gunsmith was an old guy from Seekins, and so he's like, he can build it for you. So I was thinking about going that route, and then I'm like, man, there's some rifles out there that Christensen makes that are almost, they almost feel like custom rifles, and so.
Well, and there are a lot of like legit gunsmiths in Texas who can actually build a long range rifle.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of like people, not to be too derogatory, but people who can kind of put stuff together, but aren't like master craftsmen in that. But I feel like Texas has
we got
unusual amount of just like, we're going to build a $5,000 crazy machine.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of that.
It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
So I had all these thoughts, and I'm kind of debating all this. And this Christensen MPR, like probably, 8 months ago, you'll probably remember this, probably 8 months ago, I was really looking at it heavily. And I actually started reaching out to some people that had some for sale. And I just didn't want to spend, it's about a $2,400 rifle MSRP. I didn't want to spend, that much money on a used gun, because I was just worried that what if they dropped it and something wasn't working right. So I was kind of looking at some, and I just stopped. But the MPR, I was like, man, if I ever upgrade my 6.5 Creedmoor, I'd probably get an MPR, and then I'll get a 300 caliber or 30 caliber something after that. Well, all this came to a head. We went on a hunting trip down to Rock Springs, and it's about 6.5 hour drive. And we're driving back, and I always tell Pliny this. If you guys have ever seen that movie Shooter, I'm like Mark Wahlberg, and Pliny's like that old dude that knows everything about guns and was with the CIA.
Still got the shovel.
That guy. So I use the 6 hours to go, hey, Pliny, let's talk about this amazing gun build. So we start breaking into categories, and it's like, all right.
We literally had a conversation over every component.
Every component.
We built this thing in our minds.
Yeah. And he's like, well, why are you trying to build 2 rifles? And I'm like, I really am trying to build 2 rifles.
Yeah.
But I don't want 2 rifles. I want 1 rifle. And so we started going, well, what is the ultimate goal? Well, if I could choose, I want a rifle that shoots to 1,000 yards, or more, right? That's the number one goal. And then I want to use that rifle to be able to also hunt within 300 yards, right? So 50 to 300. And I'm like, that's the rifle I want. And let's be honest, 95% of my hunting that I'll probably do in the next 10 years will be in Texas, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to go do a bunch of Western hunts where I'm taking this.
Like, you've got a bad ass way to kill a doe at 75 yards on a corn pile.
Absolutely. But I can take a neck shot now.
There you go.
Confidently.
There you go.
So I ended up, we ended up talking about it more. I'm like, man, that Christensen's what I want. The 6.5 Creedmoor, any animal here in Texas except for a nilgai that's wild range, I can put down with this thing.
Yeah.
And it's going to be ridiculously accurate within 300 yards, and at 1,000 yards, it's going to hit the plate. So
you're also sitting on a pile of really good match ammo too, which is also like, well, It's worked for me thus far, and I committed to it. So let's keep it going rather than change now.
So
some people make fun of like the 6.5 Creedmoor fanboys, and
I'm totally a fanboy now.
I am too, but there are so many good cartridges these days. But 6.5 is one of them. It's a very good cartridge for very good reason. So I think there are a lot of people who just adopt it because it's trendy and they just hear that it's cool and that it's good, and they say stuff about it that's just not even true.
Yeah.
I think we're both in the category of we actually know what it does well. And
and I mean, it's not...
We know what the BC of ELDM at 140 grain is and why we want that, and
Well, and it's not... I mean, it's not going to take down an elk, right?
It could, but would I recommend it for that? No.
I'm not taking this gun elk hunting in Montana.
Yeah.
Right?
I wouldn't recommend it.
But what I will say is that my 308 or a 30-06 or any of those, like, I'm not going to try to shoot those out to 1,000 yards and be accurate either.
Yeah, I'd take this over a 308 any day.
Oh, all day long. Yeah, all day long. So I am sitting on a stockpile of 147 grain Hornady match grade ammo, and I have that from my Creedmoor that I had before, the Ruger precision rifle. I haven't shot this new gun. We just put it together tonight. But I'm thinking that ammo will probably work out pretty well in the short term.
That is the most consistent. The 140s and the 147s. I mean, Hornady really was kind of the breath of life behind the 6.5 Creedmoor, and they just, with their match stuff, especially for the cost of it, it's incredible ammo.
Although I think I paid $1.30 a round for it, or maybe not even that much. Some guy after this whole COVID pandemic tried to charge $6 a round. I'm like, dude, you can still find the ammo. It's just $2 a round.
Yeah, that was like when we went into that little shop, and I was like, "Oh, I need some 44 mag," and I picked it up $80.
$80 for a box of 50.
Yeah,
I'll pass.
Yeah, no thanks.
So, all right, so let's talk about the components. So that's how we got here. So long ride back from Rock Springs, and we kind of modeled this gun in our heads, and then we got back. When was that? On a Sunday?
Yeah, Sunday night.
Late.
Yeah.
So that next week, I was thinking about a Nightforce because I've always really wanted a Nightforce Optic, and they came out with I don't know how long ago did they come out with the 8x zoom?
I don't really know. I mean, maybe
it's not been that long.
Yeah, a year maybe.
So
like 8x is like, so the one, the low power variables really pushed it. So it was 1 to 4s, then 1 to 6, then 1 to 8. And then there were a lot of 1 to 8s that were of questionable quality in terms of parallax, in terms of optical errors. And so Nightforce, and again, I don't even own a Nightforce, and so this is just what I know from like seeing them at SHOT Show and just looking at them a little bit. They really put a lot of gas behind perfecting their 1 to 8. And so once they had that system, the 1 to 8 ratio system, they can then build it into much larger power things because they're consistent on that zoom ratio.
And explain because I didn't know this. Explain what the 8x zoom means on a scope.
Yeah, so it's called a couple things. So some people call it zoom ratio. That's probably what I call it most. Some people call it erector ratio. But it's basically from the low power to the high power, what's your multiplier? So a
3x9 is a 3x.
Is a 3. So all like Leupold VX3s, that's what that 3 actually means. It used to be like generations, and then they kind of phased out the 2s because it didn't really make sense, and the 1s didn't make sense. And so a lot of companies are going with that as their naming convention, going with that erector ratio or zoom ratio, saying what's the multiplier between the low power and the high power. And the greater that differential, for a while, it means the more you're magnifying any error in that zoom in what's happening. And so you probably don't want to ever get a really cheap 1 to 10. Like you're asking for trouble, I think.
Yeah.
But if you're going to pay for solid high-end Japanese or German mechanics, they do it right. Now, in a second focal plane, there's kind of no problem with that. You get more on the low end, which is great for hunting, more on the high end, which is great for long-range precision stuff. But when you get into first focal plane, which is what I recommend to anybody doing long-range precision stuff, you get into some weird issues with scaling the reticle, where either it's going to be really big and chunky at max, or it's going to disappear on you. And so that's where at minimum. And so that's where reticle design becomes really, really important. And I think looking at this rifle, it is a little bit chunky, in my opinion, on the high end. Not bad, but just like more chunky than ideal.
Yep.
But you're at 32 power. Are you really going to use 32 power all the time? You're probably not going to live at the extreme ends of this scope like you normally would on a 3 to 9. My 3 to 9, I used it at 3 and I used it at 9.
Yeah.
Whereas this, like, you're good anywhere in here.
Yeah.
And so that's why a first focal plane is important, because you don't have to think about what your your reticle is true to form wherever you are.
Yep.
So all that to say, a brief explanation of zoom ratio or erector ratio and why that's important in this first focal plane optic.
Yeah, and I mean, we were kind of thinking about this. So with, again, the setup of this rifle, and this was through that 6-hour conversation that we had on the drive home, the setup for this rifle was mainly precision, right? Yep. And so there was no question it's got to be a first focal plane. And so the other interesting piece about this is on most of my rifles today, well, it's probably 50-50. No, most of them, I have MOA. And I was making the switch to mils. So this scope is a mil reticle.
You were making the switch, meaning you bought this scope, which is mils. Do you have anything else?
I have the other one on that Grendel.
Okay, you're right. You're right.
Doesn't shoot straight. So.
Another story for another day.
Yeah, another day. So making the switch to mils, I was reading a bunch about them, talking to some people, and the whole thing that came back is, all right, who do you shoot with? Well, I shoot with a guy that shoots mils. Get a mils, right? If you're both people should be shooting the same type, because then it makes it easier to make wind calls, elevation calls, all that kind of stuff. Plus, I just think, from a mindset perspective, once you get your dopes on MOA or mil, you don't really have to think about the math as much.
Well, and that's it. So many people get into MOA because they're thinking in terms of inches.
Right.
Like, oh, I translate it to inches. And so, this is 20 inches of drop. But once you know angular measurements, you're not thinking in inches anyway. Right. You're getting away from that. So you're just thinking in whatever your turret and your reticle are.
2.2.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, I like mils just because maybe it's just because I'm a dummy, but it's way easier for me to think in terms of 4.1 than 13 3/4.
Right.
So it's no fractions. No, it's just base 10. And in terms of milling out targets to calculate distance, it's just, you just divide by 1,000. So if you're looking at something and it's 1 mil in your scope and you're at 1,000 yards, it becomes pretty easy to calculate how you're like, okay, that's 1 yard.
Yeah.
What I'm looking at is 1 yard. You just divide it because it's base 10. Whereas otherwise you have to think, okay, it's this many inches.
10
now, inches to feet, feet to yards. Okay, times 1,000. Like, what a lot of people think is easier, like, you're actually thinking about the wrong thing.
And I think it all comes down to, like, neither one of them is bad.
Right.
It's a preference
They're
thing.
equally good, and they're equally accurate. Well, technically, MOA is
it's
like
a little bit more precise,
like 3% or something, like more. But how often do you care about less than a click?
Right, and if you're measuring based on that at 1,000 yards, then you're a much better shot than I am.
yeah, and there's no wind, and there's
exactly. So the setup, again, coming back to it, it's what do you want to start with? Let's start with the rifle.
The heart of the rifle is the action.
Yes.
So this action is this stainless? Do you know what it is? I mean, obviously it's coated, but do you know what it's made out of?
I think it's stainless. I'm not 100% positive though,
because I know they have a titanium action on the ridge line, but I don't know if that's this.
Yeah, I don't know either.
But
I don't know.
So it's essentially their take on a Remington 700 action. It works the same way as a Remington 700 action, but it's definitely machined better. It's slimmed down a little bit more, styled a little bit better, but it's a push feed just like a 700. The safeties works the same as a 700. Trigger in it, it's got a really nice flat aftermarket trigger. I don't know. I think somebody makes that for them.
I think so too, and I think it's adjustable, but I think it comes with a 2-pound.
Yeah. So if it's based on a Remington, that's either a Jewel, a Trigger Tech, or a Timney, and I don't think it's a Jewel. So we'd need to look at the specs, but my guess is a Trigger Tech. But ultimately, brand doesn't matter. What matters is that there is no travel in that thing.
None whatsoever.
It's just You put pressure, and then it's off. Yeah.
Yeah.
So awesome trigger.
Yep.
And then do you want to talk about that chassis a little bit? That thing looks slick.
Yeah. I mean, so the whole concept of this gun, and again, so precision was the number one, but hunting was number two. So my Ruger precision rifle without the scope is, I think, 12 pounds, somewhere around there. It's got a big rail on it. It's got and then I actually added a different stock on it, so it's even heavier. The whole concept behind this gun was lightweight precision. And so out of the box, the rifle itself without a mag that's loaded is, I think, 7.3 pounds or 7.5 pounds, something like that. Really, really light. So when you're looking at the chassis of it, it's got a carbon fiber barrel that's sitting in that chassis, but the chassis itself has carbon all over it, which makes it lighter. And then it's machined out, so you can see through it, which is kind of cool. And ultimately, the thing was built to be light. That's the whole reason that they came out with this rifle, is to be a really lightweight precision rifle.
Which is awesome for your concept, because there's a lot of people, if you're a bench rest shooter,
it doesn't matter. You can be as heavy as you want.
And in fact, to mitigate recoil,
yeah,
you probably want something that's stupid heavy. But your whole concept is start with a precision, a match rifle, but then make it light. Make it something I can hike miles
chomp
with.
In the woods with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other nice thing about this is the stock folds in. And what's kind of interesting is on my Ruger Precision, the stock folds in as well. But the way they design this, the stock folds in, I guess, let's see, to the right. And it actually, there's a hole that's been machined out that fits where the bolt knob is. And so it kind of folds right into that.
Yeah, it just nests perfectly.
It nests in there, and there's a magnet where it doesn't my Ruger Precision has a latch that flips, right? And if you want to try to get it out, you got to flip a latch and bring it out. This just has a strong magnet that holds it in place with a simple button to break it down. So just the convenience of being able to break it down, put it on a backpack, hike around is very evident. They were thinking about somebody that's going to be moving around with this rifle.
Yep. And then, of course, fully adjustable cheek riser, so you can exactly match the comb height with your scope. And, of course, falling in line with the rest of this concept of this rifle, it's carbon fiber. So it is super light. But actually what's cool about that we're talking earlier, we shoot in Texas, where if you leave your rifle out in the sun, and it'll burn you if you have an aluminum chassis. So carbon's actually a really good insulator, so it'll be nice and comfy to the touch in the heat and in the cold.
Yep. The other thing about this, the chassis on this one, so I got the desert sand or desert brown color on it. And so they make two colors for this. I know color's probably not that important to everyone, but for me, when I'm going to spend this much money on a rifle, I want it to look cool too.
It's a difficult topic for a podcast.
It is. Just visualize, or go to Christensen Arms and take a look at it. They have this color in the black, and I think that this color with the contrast of the carbon, it just makes it pop. Yeah, it just looks really, really slick.
And it's not like an FDE desert tan. It's darker than that, but it's kind of got like a satiny finish, I guess. So it's not glossy, but it's not totally flat either. It's a beautiful finish.
Yeah.
And it's a hard coat anodized, and so it should be really durable too. And then, of course, you got a really grippy butt pad on the back that looks like it's got some adjustment in it.
It's got some adjustment out as well.
But I don't think you need to really adjust it from where it is.
I don't think so either. On top of it, it's got a 20 MOA rail for your scope mount. And
which is fantastic. In this scope, you have so much travel, and so a lot of people don't really understand the purpose of that rail, or they think, how do I have to calculate my dope differently? You don't. Once you zero it, you're zeroing it, and then you just run your dope out up and down just like normal. But the advantage is your zero, instead of being so on average, when you zero a scope, it's statistically about in the middle of its range, right? And then you're moving up or down from there. Because you have this angle, you add 20 MOA to where you start your zero. So you just gain that much more in how far you can crank it. So by having that rail, you can now take full advantage of everything you have in your scope.
Yeah.
Now on some rifles with like crazy high mounts and stuff, you start running into issues where you can't zero at 100 yards.
Yeah, you got to zero at 300.
Yeah, just because you have so much angle that you're not gonna bottom out your scope. You're actually gonna top it out at your 0 point. So 20 is the sweet spot for this.
Yeah,
for sure.
I agree completely. So let's talk about the barrel for a moment. So it's a carbon fiber wrap barrel. The thing I debated about for a while is, do I want to do a 22-inch barrel or a 24? This rifle comes 22, 24, 26 for 6.5 Creedmoor. The efficiency of a 6.5 Creedmoor is fully seen at 24-inch barrels, right? At 26, you're not really gaining anything. At 22, you're losing some velocity at 1,000 yards or at muzzle or anywhere in between there. And so I was really struggling to decide.
At 26, it's the full?
No, 24 is like where you're getting the most velocity out of it. At 26, some of the velocity actually falls off.
Really?
Yeah, which I thought was really interesting.
I just thought the gains would be less significant. I didn't think that it would actually start to drag.
I looked at all these ballistic charts.
Yeah.
Right. And granted, it's based on your ammo type and all that kind of stuff too, right? So there's a lot of variables in the statement that I'm making. But it showed that, I don't remember what it was at 1,000 yards. It was, I think it's 50 feet per second less on a 24-inch barrel or 22-inch barrel than a 24-inch barrel. And then it's like 15 feet per second less on a 26 and a 24-inch barrel.
Interesting.
Yeah. And again,
and
ammo and all that.
That's probably for a certain bullet.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. But what is important, though, is all of those, when you look at the ammo box or you look in a reloading manual and stuff for 6.5 Creedmoor, most of that data assumes a 24-inch barrel.
Right. So I wanted something, again, long-range precision first, but I want to stomp around the woods. And so that's why I was thinking 22. I may eventually try to put a can on it just because it's got this massive muzzle brake on it that's going to be super loud to shoot with. So I was wondering.
It's going to be loud, but I think it's going to hold rock solid.
I think so too.
It's a 4-chamber, I call it a gill style brake. So ports that angle almost probably 30 to 45 degrees back towards you, which seems to be, from what I've shot, the most effective without blowing. Like, it doesn't blow the shooter's ears out, but if you have a spotter who's like just behind you and to the left, like that guy's you probably owe him a case of beer or something. Yeah. But really, really big brake. And then it's actually got the set screws on top, so you could actually tune the brake, tune the amount of push down that you get from that brake. I'd start with them all in like that and just only change it if you have to, because otherwise you're just making more dust, more noise, more whatever. But I mean, if you're going to reload, you can do some rifle tuning and some harmonic tuning by adjusting your ammo, but you may be able to do a little bit just by tuning your brake.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I mean, just ultimately the way this thing is put together, from every piece of it, right? Just the we were talking about earlier, the MOA rail, let's make sure that it's tightened down. Of course it was tightened down. Like, everything about this is that you can just tell that there's been a lot of effort that's put into making this a really nice precision rifle.
Yeah, they had O-rings on the set screws in the turret cap. Like, if that's not attention to detail.
That's for the Nightforce, though.
Well, but the whole package, though.
Yeah. If we're talking about the whole package, absolutely. Yeah. All right, so let's move on to the Optic.
Well, hold on. There's a little bit, the handguard on here.
Handguard.
Also carbon, M-lock, which is the way to go. The days of key mod are over.
Were those ever really around?
I didn't mind it too much. It's very functional. I mean, it's just like you go to the Container Store and look at their shelving and you're like, key mod. I've seen this before. Like, it's not particularly clever.
Yeah.
But M-lock is just, it's one that wore. You got a Picatinny rail on the bottom. You're running the Magpul bipod.
Yep.
And somebody immediately at the shop recommended the B&T Atlas, which is what a lot of PRS guys use. But to be honest, I've had tremendous success. I think I own 4 of these Magpul bipods now, and they're great.
They're great. They're lightweight.
They do have a little bit of slop in them, but I actually like it because that little bit of slop almost turns into about the right amount of pivot that you need, assuming everything else is stable. And they're not metal, so if you bang around on it, it's not making a bunch of noise, and you're not worrying about rusting your springs or anything like that. So, yeah, that's the handguard.
Yeah, it's carbon fiber again, really lightweight. Looks beautiful on the gun.
Yeah. All right, so back to your Optic.
Let's go to the Optic.
Or if we're going to accurately transition, your scope rings. If we're
right.
truly going to like work up here.
So let's go back to the premise of what we're talking about here. I wanted a rifle to be the rifle of all rifles, right? That was the whole thought process here. Something that can get me out to 1,000 yards or further and take a shot close range as well and kill an animal. And I was, as much as possible for a guy that is not rich, I was trying to bear no expenses on this thing. So I ended up getting the ultralight, I think they're the high, Nightforce scope rings, 30 millimeter scope rings. And I mean, it's unbelievable just to see the difference between like a really, really quality scope ring and one that's not.
So you can just tell from the way those rings are machined that they're not made from an extrusion. They're just extremely high quality. The finish on them looks perfect. They're just excellent high quality rings. I was trying to talk you into a nice set of NC Star rings, but you just wouldn't have it.
Well, again, I was going back to the premise of this, right? If I'm going to spend a lot of money on a rifle and a scope, I might as well go all out on everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, they weren't cheap, but I got a deal on them, and ultimately, like, I have nothing about this rifle at this point. I haven't shot it yet, but nothing about it, if it shoots well, would give me pause. Yeah. Right? There's nothing where I'm like, man, if that goes, I'm screwed.
Like that was the weak link. Yeah.
Right. And so now I feel like, all right, if I get this thing sighted in, I get it doped and everything is working well, and I'm not shooting well, I know it's me, right? Yeah. It's not the rifle, it's not the scope, it's not the rings, it's not the bipod, it's me.
And something about these designs, so it's a four screws per ring, so 2 on each side, and it's a top half and a bottom half. And for installing and there are a lot of designs, I think, that kind of look cooler or look modern or maybe are technically a little bit stronger. But for mounting something and getting it mounted really precise, those are so easy to get it precise because you literally just set it down in there and then you can tweak it just so perfectly. Whereas, like, we both on ARs have the Aero Precision one-piece mounts, yep, which has kind of a hinging action. So you kind of got to get it all right and then start tightening it and make sure you're not messing it up as you're tightening it. Or I use worn rings on a lot of other things that are kind of a side-to-side clamping mechanism. So you attach it to the rail and to the scope all at once rather than two different connection systems. They're super strong. They're super solid, but setting them up is a little bit more tedious because you got to get it all right and then tighten it as you go, and anything can slip at any point.
Interesting.
Whereas this, we view it as like, get them on your rail, get them perfect on your rail. Now drop the scope in, get the scope right. Now put the tops on. So I think this is a better system for just doing it right.
Well, and let's talk about how we did that. So we actually used 2 levels, and we took off the top turret. So we had the exposed, I guess, what do you call that?
Yeah, and so that's a lot of people will put one level on the top of the turret, which is 9 times out of 10, it's fine. But there's a little O-ring in the turret, and sometimes if the turret's not machined perfectly or the screws aren't tightened evenly, it can actually, the outside of your turret isn't necessarily level with the inside of your turret or your reticle. So you can use a plumb line, which is something I've used a lot. You just take a string, hang a weight off of it, and then you level that to your reticle. And that's definitely the best way to do it if you don't have 2 leveling devices. If you do have 2 leveling devices, then you can take that top cap off. So you're taking out, if there's any error in the cap itself, you're not going to be worried about that. And so that way you're leveling to the internals of the level. And then you just put the other leveling device on your chassis, and this has a nice, really flat spot right behind the bolt. So we get the rifle as level as possible. Then we get the scope as level as possible, and we constantly kind of look between them just to check. And then when we're happy, when we both agree, yes, I don't think we can get it any better than that, then we gradually tighten it down.
Yep.
Just like changing a tire. Tighten one screw a little bit, go across, tighten, and then get it all right, then check your level again. And I think that thing is...
I mean, it took us 5-10 minutes to do it. Which I've tried it before with... So in my kitchen where I mount scopes, because I don't have another place to do it apparently. My window behind, I've got like these lines in the panes, and so I've done it like that as kind of the the plumb drop, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's worked out okay, but this was much quicker to just take 2 levels to it and get it done real quick.
Yeah. And that's important because we've all done it. We've all put a rifle together real quick and we just kind of slapped the scope on there, held it up and said, that looks good.
Looks all right.
And, if you're just shooting at a deer or a pig at 100 yards, like, it's probably fine. Like, as long as it's not just crazy cockeyed, like, it's probably okay as long as it seems reasonable. But ultimately, when you're shooting, especially at a long distance or different elevations, like, the one thing that's ultimately consistent is gravity. So align the rifle and the scope to gravity. Doesn't matter what distance you're shooting, what altitude you're shooting, what angle you're shooting. They're always going to be lined up.
Yep.
And with that, so we know that they're true to each other, but how do we know that the whole system is true to gravity? We put this little doodad on there.
Yeah, so we got, so the cheapest thing on this setup is a little Lone Star bubble level that I think was $12.99 on Amazon.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's the only piece on this rifle that if it doesn't work well, we can replace it with something else.
And there's a really cheap, I think Shooting Made Easy makes one for like $6. So I'm not going to go to that level, but this, it's machined out of 6000 series aluminum. It's going to be fine.
Yeah.
All it has to do is hold a bubble level.
That's it. I'm not relying on it for precision downrange. Well, I kind of am, but not that kind of precision.
Yeah. It's not like a mechanical device that's changing. Like it either is right or it's not. Like it's not an infinite adjustment.
Yeah.
I think the only way that's going to fail is if you leave this out in freezing temps and that water in there freezes and it cracks.
Yeah.
Because I think maybe it's Iota or one of those companies. I think they actually use alcohol or antifreeze or something like that to prevent that. But again, what a rare scenario.
Yeah, especially in Texas.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it happened about 2 months ago, but
That's
other than
true.
that.
That's true.
So let's talk about the scope.
Yep.
So it's a Nikon, it's a Nightforce. There we go.
Yeah.
NX8 4x32. The thing I really liked about the scope.
Well, and when you say 4x32, a lot of people say 4x32 meaning fixed power 4x 32 millimeter.
4x32 by 50. So it's
you go.
4 zoom all the way up to 32 zoom,
which is just a tremendous range.
Stupid range. But again, that was the purpose of this, right? Something that can shoot close and shoot really, really far away.
Yeah. My highest power rifle scope is 20x, and I think I'm like, 20, yeah. And 32 is just like
it's stupid.
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense. So what I like about this scope, first of all, the design of it on the exterior, it looks great, right? Mm-hmm. It looks like a scope that, first of all, it's short. Compared to what I thought it would be.
Yeah,
it's
compared
light.
to this. So right here we've got the RPR sitting on the other side of the kitchen. Counter. And that's the 4 to 24? 6 to 24?
6 to 24.
6 to 20. And that thing is several inches longer.
Yes.
With 50% less magnification at the top end.
Correct.
And I think that's a pretty typical design, whereas this is just incredible Japanese optic design that's really made this thing compact.
Well, and it's less than 2 pounds, which is pretty crazy for what you're getting out of the scope.
Yeah.
So the other thing I like about the scope is that the reticle on it is light on the 4, but it's not so light that you can't see it, and it's a very simple reticle, right? So a lot of these mill type reticles, you can almost get the Christmas tree effect, or the way I look at it is like the opening credits to Star Wars, right? It's just like this.
That's a great way to. Somebody's like, "Yeah, this is a Horus H59." You're like, "No, it's Star Wars."
It's Star Wars. It's a Star Wars. That's the Star Wars reticle. So if you're doing competitions where you're not having time to dial and you're holding for everything, those Star Wars type reticles make sense. Like they do, right? Yeah. That's not the type of shooting I'll ever do with this.
For those who enjoy a long read.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted something that was really, really just simple, right? And again, not an MOA. I wanted a mill.
Yeah.
And so this is the mill C. It's basically
some mill hash type design.
Yes. It's two lines. There's no, there's not 30 lines. And then there's little hashes on the vertical and horizontal lines. The other thing that's nice about it is as you zoom in, and you're going to have to correct me on this, it's got a mill measurement to the .1, what is that thing called? That's in there on the right.
Yeah. I don't know really what you would call that. I mean, I'm sure there is some technical name for it.
It's meant to measure. So if you're doing shooting and you're looking at a stop sign from 500 yards away, you can measure that stop sign, a known size. You can measure it with this other little couple of lines inside the scope on the right hash.
Yeah.
And then that allows you to understand the size of your target. So if you're trying to call it out by mils, you can do that.
Well, you can do that anywhere on your whole reticle, but what's nice about their design is so on the stadia lines on the actual crosshair. So obviously it's in mils, so the big lines are 1 mil, 2 mils, 3 mils, but then the smaller subtensions are in 0.2 increments.
And that's in 0.1.
Yes, so that's if you really want to look at a target and get more precise and analyze it, you can do that, but it doesn't interrupt. Because I've seen some other designs where they have 0.1 real close, and then it goes to 0.2. So you get a lot of like busy craziness right in where you need to be able to line it up real quick. So that's nice so that if you need to really do range estimation, using a mil scale technique, you can really get very detailed with that without interrupting just a clean shooting picture on the reticle.
And this comes back to, I'm not sure what I'm more excited about, the rifle or the scope.
Yeah, man, it's just a great package altogether.
It's just such a fun setup. The parallax on this scope goes down to 11 yards, supposedly. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think 32 power at 11 yards is a strange combination. But, I mean, I think it's more just like they could do it, so they did.
Yeah. So the other nice thing about this, I mean, it's kind of it's not a deal breaker one way or the other, but it does have an illuminated reticle. So if you're getting a little bit into the dusk time frame, you can illuminate it. It's red and green. Yeah, they have different variables on that. And
for me, being a little bit more budget conscious, that's probably the first thing I would give up. I need good glass, and a lot of like hunters actually will prioritize glass quality over all else. To me, I think that's number 2. Tracking is number 1.
Yeah. If
it doesn't track well, if it doesn't track perfectly, then you dial it and you don't know where you are. It's not a precision rifle.
Right.
So tracking is number 1. Glass is number 2, which this has high quality ED Japanese glass. Everything about this is great. But then even the way they did that illuminated design, so normally you have that dial on the side that most optics have almost the exact same system. It goes from 1 to 11, which I always laugh because it's like Spinal Tap. It goes to 11. Like, is 11 louder? Or did they just relabel 10? It goes to 11. But it's just because it's a 12-position rotary dial and they have to have an off position, so it goes to 11.
Yeah.
But this one, it's actually a push-button design, and it's a dual color, so it toggles through all the red.
Yeah.
And then what do? You hold it, and then it toggles to the green?
Something like I haven't. So this is so hot off the presses. I haven't even looked at the manual yet.
I noticed right when you get all the way to the top, it blinks at you.
Yes.
So you know, now we're going to go back down.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. So a one button design. I mean, it's like an iPod shuffle
on a scope.
It's just one button. Well, except there's no like random feature.
Yeah, there's no random feature.
But they made a really intuitive design that you don't have some extra dial hanging off the side. And so, again, illuminated reticles aren't, like, that's not super important to me, but if you're going to do it, like, it's cool. There are times when I've definitely benefited, especially dark crosshairs on a dark hog at dusk. You're going to want it.
Yep.
Or shooting at, like, a black steel target. Like, there are definitely some times where it's a great feature to have, and that's just a super cool way to do it.
And the other nice thing about this is on the elevation turret, it's got a zero stop. And
yes.
So that's something that, especially if you're doing precision shooting, it's super important, right? Because you're sometimes doing 1, maybe 2 full rotations on your turret to get out to 1,000. Like on my RPR today, I've got the Nikon FX1000 that does have a zero stop, but I have to do almost 2 full rotations. No, it's about 1.5 to get out to 1,000 yards. So what you want to be able to do is, let's say you're taking those shots, and then like what we do, we throw out corn on a pipeline and see if a pig comes in. I need to dial it back really quick to 100 yards. Yeah. I can just zip it all the way back down, stop at 0, and then dial back up to 100, 200, whatever. Well, actually, I have it dialed in at 100, but go back up to 200 yards if I need to, real quick.
Yep. And it adds one more fail-safe so that you don't have to think, did I turn it once or did I turn it twice?
Yep.
And then, because I've done it. I've gone to the range. I turned it back to 0. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. It's on 0. And then I shoot.
Shot 2 feet above the target.
Yeah. And I have this like huge rifle. And then I'm shooting 2 feet above the target with a 20 power scope. People are like,
you're an idiot. What are you doing?
Stupid or something? And I was like, oh, I was a whole turn off. So 0, like obviously you can count turns on anything, but a 0 stop is just like when all else fails, just go back to 0.
Yep.
And then count back up.
Yep.
So super great feature. And also on this turret, you get 10 mils per rotation.
Yeah.
Which on my Leupold LRP, I only get 5. And so the clicks are very like chunky and precise, which feels great, but it means I have to go more than a full rotation to get out to 1,000 yards. For you, I mean, you're shooting a really heavy bullet, that 147, so it may be a little bit different. But I bet you'll be at 1,000 yards before you even get a full rotation with this thing.
Yeah, probably.
So that's cool.
The last thing that I'll mention on this is it does have a cap on the windage turret, which I never really thought about that until I looked at the scope and the pros and cons, right? If you're going to make wind calls and you're going to actually dial for them, then obviously you're going to want to take that off, right? But if you're like me, who I've never dialed for wind,
yeah,
I set my windage and then I leave it and then I hold for wind. I actually like the cap idea a lot, especially if I'm tromping around in the woods with it, because if I'm in the woods and I accidentally hit that and I don't have a cap on it, that could throw off a shot that I'm going to take.
Well, and with the cap design, ultimately it's there are a few hunting scopes that now, since long-range shooting is becoming a trend, it's a closed windage turret that doesn't have any sort of obvious target style adjustment like this, and then either a closed elevation turret or an open target style adjustment. But this, you can make the decision on a moment-by-moment basis. If you want an open target style turret, or you want to say, yeah, that's still in there. It still works that same way, but I don't want to think about it, cover it up.
Yep. Yeah, so I mean, overall, for what I was looking for with this package, I was looking for something that can get me out to 1,000 yards and beyond first, and then I was looking for something that could take a shot at 100 yards at a pig or a deer, and this is literally the ultimate package for what I was looking for.
Yeah,
6.5 Creedmoor, Christensen modern precision rifle with a Nikon. I did it again with a Nightforce.
Yeah,
I got to start saying that right. It's a much more expensive scope. With a Nightforce NX8, and it's just, I can't wait to take this thing out. Like, I cannot wait.
Driving around my Toyota, I mean Lexus.
I mean my Bentley.
Oh, 2 other things we didn't cover here. The magazine.
Oh, yes.
So that's just a AICS, Accuracy International Chassis System, I believe is what that is. So it's a standard short action magazine. This is a Magpul one, which sits it's a little tight.
It's a little tight. The only thing about this has been a little bit off.
And I think, because the RPR also uses an AICS. My Savage BA Stealth uses an AICS. But I think it may be the Magpul magazine. So you'll need to figure that out. And then the grip on here is also Magpul. That's the MOE-K, which the K, this is where I'm just a dork.
I love it.
The K means Kurz, which is short in German. That's where that came from.
Really?
It originally came from a 380 was called a 9mm Kurz, a 9mm short. And so Magpul was just like, hey, we're going to be kind of cute and clever and do the same thing with our grips.
That's interesting.
So a lot of suppressors do that too. You'll have like a standard Gemtech suppressor and then a K model. I don't know if Gemtech does it, but just an example.
Interesting.
K means short. But I like the short grip on here because, so right now it's sitting on the table. You've got the toe of the buttstock all the way against the ground, and the bipod and your pistol grip actually doesn't even touch the ground.
Yep.
And it's not that, so a lot of those like ergo grips and the super rubberized grips, you can get a really good grip on it, so it feels good in the hand, but it's kind of that, it's too sticky and grippy for a precision rifle.
I agree. The other thing too is these, what are those called?
Oh, so a lot of people just call them QD points or QD holes. They're actually called flush cups because it's
flush cups.
It's a cup, but it fits flush, so nothing protrudes. So that's where the name is. Yeah, and they're all over the place.
You've got QD points all over this thing, so you can put a single point sling with the M lock on the front of this too, on the handguard. I think what I'm going to end up doing is probably putting a QD on the M lock up front.
Yeah,
and then there's a QD on the back on the stock that I'll probably put there and have a 2-point sling. Although I did have a single point sling that I put on it just to play around. There's one right above the grip, QD lock, or what did you call it, a flush cup?
Yeah.
Right above the grip, and that actually worked out pretty well. So I don't know what I'm going to do there, but it gives you options, which is kind of nice.
Well, I don't know. And that's one of those endless like tactical debates that people like get on AR15.com and just like argue about.
Yeah.
Like 1-point sling or 2-point sling. Like if you're still using a 3-point sling, like you're wrong. Yeah. Like you're just straight up wrong. 1-point sling, the reason I don't like it is one time I was running with my rifle and I got smacked in the nuts real bad. And so for then on, I'm like, nope. 2-point.
Go to 2-point, put it on my back.
But there's lots of people, like high-speed combat operator type people, who swear by one. And I can't say they're wrong.
I use a 1-point for my ARs.
Yeah.
I don't know that this is the right setup for a 1-point because it's a little longer, although it's actually probably lighter than my ARs, which is just insane to think about.
Yeah.
But I think I'll end up going with a 2-point sling, throwing it on my back, walking around when we find the right pig, take a shot at it.
Man, and like just the fact that thing folds up, it's so lightweight. Like lugging this is so much better than lugging that. Well, your RPR folds up, but it's heavy.
It's heavy.
And I compare it to my Savage, which is a little lighter than your RPR, but not much, but it doesn't fold up at all. It's that length all the time, like 50 inches or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas this is already shorter because of the chassis design. Then it folds up, and then it's got lots of rigging points. Like what a great portable setup.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't be more thrilled. I'm excited. This is the rifle that I've been wanting for a really long time, and I'm super excited about the setup. And I can't wait to do a podcast to talk about the first animal we kill with it.
Yeah, well, the proof's in the pudding. So I guess we got to make sure it shoots. Go out to the range, get your dope chart built out so you know exactly where it's hitting, and then go out, shoot some steel, shoot some pigs, and just
see what happens.
Have a blast.
Yeah.
All right. Well. Another episode of Pliny and Daniel being complete gun dorks. I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you found it interesting. Just the whole concept of one rifle to rule them all if you're going to combine a long-range precision setup and a hunting setup. Man, I think this is a good way to do it.
I think this is it. At least for me, this is the one.
Yeah, buddy. All right. Until next time, stay safe, be free, and never stop seeking adventure.